for the last talk of this session, we have a team with many people, but two speakers, Pfeiffer and Jose Emilio Labra Gayo. And the title is Representing the Luxembourg Shared Authority File based on CIDOC-CRM in Wikibase. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the introduction, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to present our project about shared authority file project for digital cultural heritage data from Luxembourg using our standardized data modeling approach by using CIDOC-CRM, and this in a technical frame of a Wikibase. Before I'm going to be we're going to dive into the data modeling part, I'm going to shortly present the project itself. So what is the project about? The Shared Authority File project was initiated by the Competency Network, Digital Cultural Heritage from the Ministry of Culture in Luxembourg. And the main idea was to combine the knowledge from the National Heritage Institution with the idea to increase the impact of the members' institution digitized collection. So every institution has its local collection, and they really wanted to try benefit by putting them together. This was done mainly is done in a first phase on persons, even though we envisage to do this also for corporate bodies, conference events, geographical areas, technical terms, and work titles in a second phase. Speaking about the competency network, it might be interesting to explain that we have a very heterogeneous field. We do not have only libraries. We have the Ministry of Culture, the National Museum, the National Archive, the National Library, the Audiovisual Archive, Archaeological Institute, the Site and Monuments, and the Institute of Natural History. So all these different institutions bring naturally their very heterogeneous data into the project. By putting this into practice, we were not alone. We were assisted also by external partners in the project coordination, but also by the external development and the external expertise by developing the data modeling and the mapping to Wikibase. This all with the idea in mind that we had to go into the project phase with several choices. By putting or setting up the data model, we decided to go for a standardized data modeling approach by using CIDOC-CRM and to use Wikibase, the open source product, to store and to use it as an internal user interface. And this combination we think makes a very strong point for the project, as it combines this open source technical approach with a standardized data modeling approach, which is very strong by its fact that it's an international standard which is specific to cultural heritage. And Jose will now explain how this has been put into practice.
We started with a data modeling phase where different domain experts were creating diagrams and Excel sheets, and we also started selecting some running examples, so we could model those running examples using these data models. We started. We use CIDOC-CRM as the main approach to do that model, and the volume is low. Maybe it's now better. What we mean, but event-centric approach of CIDOC-CRM is that, for example, here this is an example where you are modeling a person. It says that it was born and it has a birthplace, and then the birthplace has several attributes. So you can see that everything is modeled in this way, that you focus on the events and so on. And similar is, for example, to the actor appellations. For example, the different names they have of a person. They are actor appellations and they consist of several components. So that's the approach that is followed by CIDOC-CRM, but we need to map that to Wikibase data model. In the Wikibase data model, you could also define that in an event-centric approach, but we also thought that it would be more natural to follow the qualifiers and references data model that Wikibase already employs. And so we were trying to do this mapping, and also to do these mappings, we obtained help from using shape expressions. So we created some shape expressions to do the data model of CIDOC-CRM and also the data model in Wikibase. So that's an overview of this approach. The idea is that there are different institutions. The different institutions will generate data in these CIDOC-CRM data models. Those CIDOC-CRM will be data models will be converted, or data will be converted to the Wikibase, to the internal Wikibase that is being used, and that is just based on the Wikibase data model, which is using qualifiers and references. In order to understand this mapping, we were using this running example of this person. For example, this is it's a real person that existed, that is Philip IV, and he was the Count of Nassau-Weilburg, but so he was the fourth in Count of Nassau-Weilburg, but also the third in Count of Nassau-Saarbrücken. So something we use this example because you cannot assume that the 4 is, for example, for Nassau-Saarbrücken, because that would be you would combine the numeration with the title in a wrong way. So the 4 must be with Nassau-Weilburg and the 3rd with Saarbrücken. And then also in this example, we assume that we have some data that comes from Wikipedia and another from the National Library of Germany, and then we have these examples. So the representation using CIDOC-CRM would look something like this. In this diagram, you could say that you have the person has an actor appellation, and the actor appellation consists of the Philip, Ford, and Nassau-Weilburg, so that's by default the full name, but it can also be identified by alternative actor appellations, for example, Philip III and Saarbrücken, and so on. So in this way, you can see that you have, in this case, they are not events, but they are actor appellations have their own nodes with different values. And now when we wanted to map this to Wikibase, we took into account these qualities. We wanted the model to be intuitive, so if you go to a web page, you could obtain most of the information of a person without not having to navigate to different nodes. We also wanted to be able to record the source of information and the provenance of the different information, and also we wanted to ensure that there was some consistency, and it was not going to be able to combine this Philip III with Philip IV and the titles in a different way. So that's what we wanted to try, and we were looking to different options to do this mapping. We identified several approaches to do this mapping, but at the end we followed the approach that is closer to the Wikibase references and qualifiers model, which I think it makes sense, because in that way you can see all the information about a person or about a record. It is in a single web page, and you could link to the different qualifiers and references after that. So this is a good way. One disadvantage of this data model that we noticed, and maybe it's something to take into account is that it is not possible to add references or qualifiers to qualifiers. So if you want to a specific, for example, if you want to have more granularity and you want to say that this numeration is not okay, with this data model it wouldn't be possible. So there's a limitation here. But on the other hand, you could also create another whole record of the numeration, title, and name, and that could be okay. So this is the representation in Wikibase. So you have, for example, a person, and the person has a statement, which is the name. In this case, it's Philip. And then this statement is qualified with a numeration, which is 4, a title, which is Nassau-Weilbruch, and the source of information, which is Wikipedia. And then you could have an alternative name, which are other qualifiers, and these are qualifiers, and then another reference. So the orange one is a reference, and this one is a qualifier. And this fits very well with the Wikibase data model. And for example, this is an example where you could see here the representation of this person in Wikibase. This is a playground that we were using. It's a Wikibase instance that is running in WB stack, which is something that you can use to create your own Wikibase instances. And as you can see here, it has the name of this person is Philip, but then you can have here the different qualifiers. For example, the numeration is 4 and the title is Count of Nassau, and the reference is pointing here to the source of information. In this case is Wikipedia. And then you could have another alternative names. For example, another alternative name is Philip, but now with a different numeration and title. It's a third and Count of Nassau-Saarbrücken. For example, Philip 4, which I think in this case we didn't put qualifiers, but yes, the qualifier is 4 in this case. Okay, and this is how we represent it. And now, as conclusions, we can say that we have been able to create this mapping, these data models first in CIDOC-CRM that were created by the domain experts, and then we created we converted those data models to shape expressions, and then we created another mapping to Wikibase, to a Wikibase data model. All of this work was with the help of shape expressions, which we think that they were very intuitive to define the data model and to find some inconsistencies. At the end, they are human readable, but you can also check with some specific examples and try to validate those examples, and that's something that we could use with these running examples. And they are also available for RDF and also for Wikibase in this entity schemas extension. And now, at this moment, they are developing the system. So at this moment, we have a proof of concept that we have developed, but they are running a system which we expect to be in production, but it is not yet ready. At the end, what we consider that this approach could be helpful for other cultural heritage institutions that could try to do something similar. So we could learn from those different approaches. And I think that was the presentation.